We are going to get started. Welcome to the Mahoosic Way Lunchbox Zoom. I'm Amy Scott, Program Manager with Northern Forest Center, and I'm joined today with Hannah, and actually,
my name is Hannah McCarthy. I'm the fundraising coordinator.
Hannah has just joined the team at Northern Forest Center, which is why I've forgotten her last name.
Yes, I'm brand new, second week.
We met 1 minute ago for the first time. But she's in town today, so she's joining us. So just a reminder, stay muted if you're not talking, and also that this whole session is being recorded. And so today our theme is regional collaboration. And we are joined by Mia Purcell, who's the Vice President for Economic Development and Impact for Community Concepts Finance Corporation, and Kirk Siegel, who is the Executive Director of Mahoosic Land Trust. And they are both involved in efforts that have been borne by and benefited over the long term regional collaboration. And they are going to share some of their experiences and share how regional collaboration has played a role in the work that they're doing. In both cases, their work did not start because of the Mahoosic Way, because of the Community Destination Academy. However, that whole process certainly validated the priorities in the community and showed that these were the kind of things that people wanted to see happen in the region, in the community, and that they believed that doing this through collaboration across the region would be better for the community, for the projects themselves, and for the long-term outcome in the end. So the great part also about the Mahoosic Way is that it is provides an avenue for amplifying the work that both Mia and Kirk and others are doing in the region, and lend some more capacity to those efforts, and hopefully through doing things like this and some of the other work that we do through the Mahoosic Way gets the word out more broadly across the region, and also out to visitors about what is going on in this area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mia, who is going to be talking about broadband.
Great. Hey, thanks, Amy. And I just want to recognize a couple of members of the Broadband Committee who are on this webinar. Michelle Cole, who's a select board member in Bethel, and Marcel Potlick, who represents the town of Woodstock. So I'm going to talk about the benefits of collaboration with broadband for towns, for internet service providers, and with a special focus on funding, both for towns and providers. And I'm going to talk about this primarily in the context of the Mahoosic Broadband Committee. And just for everyone's base knowledge, that committee is made up of 7 communities. They include 5 organized towns: Bethel, Gilead, Greenwood, Newry, and Woodstock, plus 2 unorganized territories. And those would be Albany Township and Milton Plantation. And they are basically formed, this group is formed around the SAD 44 towns that are part of the school district. So there are different ways to form collaboration, or at least they've been formed by other regions around the state, but looking for excuse me, natural relationships like a school district where towns are already involved with each other is a good way to start. Towns that are sharing a transfer station, anything else like that where towns already have an existing relationship. Geography is also very important with broadband. Towns that are next door to each other, that are adjacent, really makes a lot of sense, because broadband does not know town boundaries. It really follows roads. And I was wondering, Isabella, can you show the map of this area so everybody can see what it looks like. So this is the front cover of the Casco Bay report. The tiny yellow lines are obviously the outline of the different towns in this region. And then the squiggly blue, green, and sort of pinkish lines are all representative of internet. So you can see that the internet lines really have very little to do with town boundaries. And I want to add too that regional collaboration is especially important and beneficial to unorganized territories, because obviously they don't have a town government. They are part of the county, and they're usually unserved for the most part. Certainly that's the case been with Albany and Milton. And I'll touch on the importance of an unserved area, which means that they have DSL service or have generally what one would consider poor service, if they have any at all. So collaboration attracts internet service providers to consider serving an area. And an individual small town like one of our towns really doesn't have a lot of choices. They pretty much have to look at their incumbent provider because most outside providers who aren't serving the area aren't interested in a small town. And can you pull up the other slide? Yes. So here you can see the potential subscriber locations. And when I say subscriber location, that means that's a home or a business. It's not population. And you can see we're all pretty small. Bethel is obviously the largest, has the most subscriber locations. But when you put them all together, it's over 5,500. And that can attract another internet service provider beyond the service providers who are already here. So increased numbers of potential locations, as I said, also offers options for towns beyond just working with their incumbent provider. And our incumbent providers here are First Light and Spectrum. So because we've been able to amass a larger number of locations working regionally, GWI has expressed an interest in serving this area, and they've given us a proposal as a utility district. A small community would never get a proposal for a utility district. A utility district also offers us the opportunity to consider revenue bonds as a funding option, which none of the other providers would have as part of what they're offering. It would be grants or loans or bonds, mostly municipal bonds. We also are considering fixed wireless. That works much better on a regional basis than it does serving one small town. And I can add that Google Fiber has expressed an interest in working with this region plus 2 other regions. And those 2 others are the SAD 72 region and Southern Oxford County, which is another group of 7 towns just south of us. It includes Stoneham and Lovell. And also the Western Cumberland County small towns. So if all of us could come together, potentially we could bring Google Fiber to this area. So I mentioned that regional collaboration also increases or has impacts on funding. It can increase eligibility for grant funds. And in particular, having the UTs as part of the unorganized territories as part of our region makes us more eligible for grant funding, because grants are largely targeted at bringing high-speed internet service to unserved areas. And as I said earlier, Albany and Milton are predominantly unserved areas. So this has increased our eligibility for some of the grant funding that's coming down the pike. It's also allowed us to go to each one of the organized towns, not the unorganized towns, and ask them if they would be willing to designate their American Rescue Plan Act funds, which came from the federal government, for broadband. So individually, if the towns were to do that, they would have small amounts of money, but pulling them all together, it's over $520,000. And most grants have a 25% match requirement. The $520,000 is not going to reach that 25% match requirement, but it puts us a long way to getting there. And it would help us get other outside funding to help with the match requirement. Lastly, collaborating has also helped us save money. We did a study with Casco Bay Advisors, and it was a mapping study to basically drive the roads in this region and identify what service each individual location has or doesn't have. And for an individual town, no matter how many locations or population size, Casco Bay Advisors would charge a minimum of $15,000 just to cover one town. But as a group, we ended up spending $34,000 because the more towns that you can put together, because of the fact that the roads go over the town boundaries, it made it more feasible for them to do it for a lower price for the whole region. So we saved some money by basically bringing all the towns together. I wanted to end what I have to say with a couple of points on fostering collaboration, both from our experience with the Mahoosic group, but also from what I've heard from some other organizations. And that is that having a common goal that everybody buys into, and when I say everybody, all the collaboration partners, is really key. We have a goal, and that's providing universal service that's reliable, high speed, and future ready for all residents in the area. That's our goal, and that's what we've measured everything by. Strong leadership is important. That's been really interesting to see with the SAD 72 group. They're all volunteers, but they meet every 2 weeks. They've got a couple of retired CEOs who are leading the effort there. It's super strong. And good communication among all the partners is really important. And another key piece is sometimes, and it's to be expected, at least with broadband, that one of the partners may drop out. And that certainly has happened with us, with Gilead. Once we decided to go to the point where we asked the towns to commit their American Rescue Plan Act funds, Gilead said, we aren't in a position to do that. The response to that is be patient, continue to communicate with them because they'll probably come back at some point in the future. Don't just let them go. So good communication, leadership, and a common goal are really all key to fostering regional collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Great outline of what you've been working on. We are going to have time for questions later, so we're going to turn it right over to Kirk to share regional collaboration around conservation projects.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Mia. This whole notion of regional partnerships is not new, and just thinking back to sort of the spirit of regional collaboration pre-Mahoosic Way. And the genesis of Mahoosic Land Trust creation was a regional effort started by National Training Laboratories, NTL, a community conference, so-called, in the mid-1980s. And I'm sure I see Robin and Marcel who were there. That resulted in the creation of various regional collaborations. And the Mahoosic Land Trust was born out of that. So it's nothing new, the regional thinking, but it has matured tremendously over the last, several decades. The local partnerships, I wanted to start off, our conservation organizations were 30 years ago not terribly collaborative, in a sense that it was a very local effort, and that's changed a ton, but the local partnerships are still critical. So for instance, Mahoosic Land Trust and Bethel Historical Society have co-sponsored a talk by a New York Times bestseller author. And as many of you know, Mahoosic Land Trust and Inland Woods and Trails have shared summer interns through an internship program, have worked collaboratively to extend the Bethel pathway from town to the Land Trust and ultimately to the Bethel Community Forest. We provide each other with letters of support. So that's just two organizations, but that same spirit of collaboration pervades this region, which makes it a lot of fun. You know, we all have our individual organizations, have great people, but when you can team up with others, it's just the energy and synergies are wonderful. So the bigger picture, I guess, going from the local to the more regional, and I will share a screen that's at first may look terribly confusing, but land conservation organizations are often belong to regional conservation partnerships. And this collage of color has numerous, this is Maine and New Hampshire. The red line is the Appalachian Trail. And the vertical line in the middle is the New Hampshire-Maine border. And if you can make it out, so we're part of numerous collaborations. There's dozens of these throughout throughout New England. Mahoosic Land Trust, along with organizations like Northern Forest Center, which administers Maine West, Western Foothills Land Trust, Inland Woods and Trails, many others, and in the health, education, conservation, those sectors are all part of Maine West. And that area includes, I've got a better picture of it. Give me a quick second here. Well, you get the idea. It's this blue outlined area. And Bethel's kind of right here on the southwestern end. And then Sebago Clean Waters is outlined in brown below. And so we're part of Sebago Clean Waters. And then Maine Mountain Collaborative is all this huge area that includes many of these in Maine Mountain Collaborative. So the long story short is that we're working with conservation partners in multi-sectors. Maine West, again, it's cross collaboration across the conservation, education, health, and economic sectors. I was forgetting the word economic a minute ago. And a little bit of a cleaner map there of the area that includes Bethel, River Valley, Rumford area, and Oxford Hills. And one of the really cool things that's come out of this is the, and can you see the Maine West planning map, people who know it? Yeah, so, and you can see our area. And this was an effort of the Maine West collaboration to look at important sectors, the health, education, economic, conservation, and try to figure out how to best understand the highest value lands that we might look at to conserve or to look at more closely for our partnership goals. And so we can go in and we can look at, right now it's selected to look at land that's adjacent to schools and town parks, but we can also look at productive forest soils. We can also look at lands that are adjacent to schools. So I already said that, working agricultural lands, et cetera. And then we can look at sort of overall highest value land areas that serve all the sectors, the most highest score, so to speak. And then we can go in and we can look at actual parcels, and that would help us. You know, a couple of our organizations might get together and do a project, a conservation project. And having the parcel map lets us go in and so here's Valentine Farm at Mahoosic Land Trust, and actually look at the parcels and see who owns them. And that could turn out to be a new conservation recreation project. And it's just a very useful tool. It's when the phone rings and someone calls and says, you know, we have a piece of land that we think might be of interest to the land trust or the conservation community, we can immediately go in, we can find out what's important about it, and then we can talk to our partners in Maine West. And so that's sort of the gist of that aspect. And then just briefly, we're partners in the Maine Mountain Collaborative with a number of statewide groups and one other land trust, the Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust. And this is sort of a think tank in a way. In our meetings, we talk about broad regional trends in conservation, financing strategies to leverage federal money, foundation money. We bring foundations and funders in to do tours of properties that are of interest, and really try to work together wherever possible and share information so that we're not approaching a landowner when another conservation or recreation group is also doing the same thing. And then there's a lot of innovation conservation finance discussions going on about how to conserve land, sequester carbon, and do all kinds of other good things all at once. Then just lastly, of these regional conservation partnerships, the Sebago Clean Waters, we're the newest member, so our name doesn't even appear on the website, but we have been for almost a year. And again, it's a partnership that has leveraged very significant amounts of money. The 13,000 acre conservation easement that Mahoosic Land Trust acquired in December was born out of the Sebago Clean Waters, a federal grant that Sebago Clean Waters spearheaded. That's an $8 million federal grant. And many of you know the lands include Overset Pond, Round Mountain, Mary McFadden and Larry Stifler, their family lands are now under conservation. So that all came about because of working with partners in a partnership, again, that leverages expertise and funding. How am I doing for time? Am I out of time, or do I have a minute?
You still have a minute, Kirk.
I have 1 minute. Okay.
Well, you have a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Going back a little more locally, and I'll stop sharing for a second. The opportunity for the conservation of the Chadbourne lands came up several years ago, and the Conservation Fund ended up being the national organization that was able to successfully bid on and acquire as an interim owner about 15,000 acres of land in Western Maine that had been carefully managed and acquired by the Chadbourne family, mostly as working forest, but also with very important ecological gems and important recreational lands over many, many decades, starting in the 1800s. And the Conservation Fund then reached out to organizations like Western Foothills Land Trust, like Inland Woods and Trails, like Mahoosic Land Trust, and said, look, we're going to try to acquire this land. We're going to try to bid on it, but we need local partners who are willing to say, okay, we'll step up and we'll try to raise the funds to purchase that. And in that process, Inland Woods and Trails is acquiring from the Conservation Fund in addition to the Bethel Community Forest. Western Foothills Land Trust is acquiring numerous parcels that enhance their conservation work in, especially in Waterford and Norway and Oxford. Mahoosic Land Trust is acquiring Tumbledown Dick Mountain in Gilead. And the other thing we've done that's, I'm not going to say it's not unique, because there are models for this in different parts of the country and in the state of Maine. But together we wrote grants, acquired funding so that we could engage a joint fundraiser with a common, the common goal of conserving lands in the Chadbourne Tree Farm. And now we're starting to go together. So Kirk and Gabe and Lee meet with potential donors that we hope will be significant donors to make it worth the time and effort. And we go out and walk the properties or meet at one of our offices and talk about the impact of this on the region. Early indications are positive that we can do more together than any of us could do on our own. And I guess that's the obvious takeaway, and it's consistent with Mia's message as well. So that's sort of in a nutshell what we're doing in regional collaboration.
That's excellent, Kirk. Thank you very much. So what we typically do at the end here is we invite people to leave if you need to move on with your day, and at 12:30 here, and then but we stay on for optional Q&A for another 15 minutes. So we are going to make that transition now, so don't feel bad if you need to sign off. But for the Q&A, just jump in. If you have a question or a comment, just unmute and ask away.
It looked like Jay had a question.
I think he was saying goodbye.
I have a question. So at what point, Kirk, in the conservation world, do you think there may be a collaboration of collaborations, a super collaboration that would even bring even super funders to the table, basically raising the profile of Maine many more levels than what we're doing right now?
Well, and Marcel, I know you've been a proponent and a leader in collaborative work for many years, and I've been wondering the same thing myself. The one thing about these collaborations is they're actually quite time-consuming, and because of our geographic location, we're at sort of the intersection of Maine Mountain Collaborative, Maine West, Sebago Clean Waters, and it's like, I don't know if I can handle another collaboration. And some days I would like, why don't they just all merge together? And I think, and we have actually talked about, if not written a grant proposal between Maine West and High Peaks, or two of the ones I'm involved with, there has been at least one grant proposal to do that, where we do have that impact that's way more than any of our existing. Good idea.
Thank you.
Oops. Marcel, you had your hand in for quite a while, pulling together a bunch of different land trusts, right, down on the coast.
Well, no, what actually, one of the early parts of the history is, at one point I was part-time executive director of both Western Foothills Land Trust and Mahoosic Land Trust. And actually I incorrectly thought that it would be a good idea for those two groups to merge because of having more capacity. As it turned out, both groups evolved on their own and developed very strong local strengths that would not have been appropriate to have merged. So sometimes keeping separate identities and collaborating is more effective than merging.
I think you're right. I think that people like to really feel that it's a neighborhood operation, but we need all the neighbors. So you're probably right. I don't think it would work to collaborate with others in the area, other than the way we've done with Maine West. That's worked pretty well with 4 school districts.
Well, and it sounds too like your point, Marcel, is it's about it's about the timing or what's going on at the moment or where an organization is in its lifespan and what's going on externally. That it's not an automatic, better approach, but at certain times in certain places, it is the better approach, but it's not a given, an automatic.
Early on in the land trust movement, they were over 80 land trusts. There was concern that these land trusts would be able to continue and thrive. And there was an effort to try to get groups to merge. And there were a few coastal land trusts that did merge effectively, but for the most part, I think they've stayed separately. One question that I'm curious about that I would be willing to pose is, anyone think that on the horizon that some of our towns may merge? That I've not seen. We have over 400 towns in Maine, and each of them separate infrastructure costs to maintain, and but it's not something that I would ever consider seeing in my lifetime.
Marcel. No, don't you remember when we had the big battle over the Bethel Newry town line? That lasted for 2 or 3 years.
I think to your point, Marcel, you might see more sharing of services. Maybe not merging of town governments per se, but sharing of services just to reduce cost. That's my guess.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, the map that Mia put up, seeing the town lines, what strange configurations they are. Some of the shapes are really odd. Just wondering what all the backstories are behind that to bring
It
up
is
the
interesting.
line and then all the way back down and then.
Well, some of it's based on the landforms, and some of it's based on the 100-acre plots that everything was laid out in. So yeah, it is odd.
Yeah, I have a question
Not
on
real
the,
best.
Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah.
I have a question for Mia on the broadband. I'm just curious where you think we're at in the timeline and really what's the next milestone to hit?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Thanks for asking. So where we are is we just submitted a sort of midpoint report, which I think you probably got a copy of, Neil.
Mhm.
And it was sent to all of the select boards and town managers. And it's a first cut assessment from the various meetings and proposals that we've received from the internet service providers that we've spoken with. What we're waiting for right now is a fourth proposal from First Light. I have to be a little candid and say they've not been as responsive as we had hoped they would be, but we are hopeful that this fourth proposal will be more interesting for us than the previous ones that they've given us. And then the other piece that we're looking at is a deeper dive into the broadband utility, which is a really different concept than anything else that we're looking at. And I think there's obviously some questions, particularly among a couple of the town managers, and rightfully so, about, is this something that we should do?
Right.
There is one, excuse me, one utility here in the state of Maine that's been operating for more than 2 years. It's Callis and Baileyville. It's called the Down East Broadband Utility, and they're expanding, and they're a perfect example of 2 very small towns that got together and they created a fiber network. They have just one internet service provider, but they could have more. And they're now expanding and taking in other nearby small towns. We could do something very similar here. So that's one thing that we're doing a deeper dive into, and it's GWI, Great Works Internet out of Biddeford, which is a obviously Maine-based internet service company that has provided that proposal. And then there's one other proposal that we've gotten, which we're really waiting for information from the state, and that's from Red Zone Wireless. They have given us a proposal for fixed wireless service, which would mean it would go on existing cell phone towers, and then they would use repeaters to further distribute the signal. And they're using brand new equipment that hasn't been fully tested. And so we're waiting for the state to give us some feedback on that. Plus, there's another town here in Maine, Litchfield, that has decided to go ahead and implement Tirana service there. And so we're waiting to see how the residents in that town like this service. So there's a fair amount that we still have to investigate, and we're hoping that at least the first light and the utility work can be done over the next 2 months or 2.5 months. And we're not sure when the state will give us feedback on the Tirana equipment. And Litchfield is supposed to, aren't they, Marcel, aren't they supposed to go online like in May, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So stay tuned, more to come.
Thank
Always.
you. Thanks for all your work on that.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, you're done.
Amy, thank you so much for providing the forum to talk about this great topic.
Yeah. And I would just add that there's other regional collaboration that's happening as a result of the Mahoosic Way. I mean, we're looking at housing, workforce issues. So what Kirk and I have talked about is ongoing right now, but there's new stuff in the works.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Mia. It's true. And if there are any of those in particular that people are interested in holding another Lunchbox Zoom on, always feel free to be in touch with topic suggestions or ideas. And also we are thinking at some point that one of the upcoming Lunchbox Zooms would be more of an open forum so that we can hear more from, you in the community. What are you thinking about? What are things that are coming to top of mind for you, or what would you like to discuss with others, in this whole idea of the Mahoosic Way? So keep your eye out for that. And this recording will be made available, so we'll be sure to put it in the next newsletter. And we really appreciate everybody coming today. And extra thanks to Mia and to Kirk. Thanks for taking the time to share today. And thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
One more thing before we go. I just was thinking about that this is the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. And the Androscoggin Watershed Council is particularly interested in having things going on up and down the river. We're going to kick it off in Rumford with a big opportunity for news folks to get in and tell us what's happening, because Rumford was where it all started with. That's where Muskie grew up, and he's the one that came up with the act. So keep an eye out for that. And if any of the groups that you're involved with want to be a part of any of it, we'll be happy to have you. We're starting a calendar, but we can always add to it.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. We'll be sure to put that in the Mahoosic Way newsletter and keep that updated as we get information, including who to contact if you want to be a part of the multiple events and celebrations.
Exactly.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's excellent.
Good.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great
Bye,
afternoon.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.